I truly can't believe that we don't have.
These guys are somebody.
I know, they're special.
Saying we got an audience and nobody is here. That's
Jim, you got, another week or another meeting reprieve of the unruly hordes that will descend upon you at some point.
Yeah. Okay, I will call this meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Park Commissioners to order. And we'll note for the record that Commissioners Castellini, Getz, Thomas, and Lindner are present in the room, and participating via Zoom, Commissioner North is with us as well. So we have a complete commission today. I'll just announce that we have received several public comments which have been distributed in advance to all the commissioners. There are no public comments here today, nobody participating either on Zoom or in the room. So we will move on, and I will just thank those of the community that have sent in comments. First thing on our agenda would be the approval of minutes from our last meeting held on June 17th. Are there any additions, corrections, or modifications at all? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Castellini moved and Lindner seconded. Any other discussion? If not, Mary, since we do have a remote participant, let's do this by roll call, if you would.
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner?
Yes.
Commissioner North?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Our first agenda item is to look at Rule 25 regarding swings, hammocks, and slack lines. So Director, walk us through this.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. This is a rule change that we are suggesting, and in order for you to understand the staff recommendation a little better, I'm going to ask Crystal Courtney, who's our Division Manager of Natural Resources, to explain the change in the rule that we are requesting.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time. So as noted in the board report, over the past season, we've seen a marked increase in hammock use throughout the park border, throughout all park property. And so with that, our current regulation basically states that you cannot hang up a hammock or a swing in the parks outside of a designated area. Unfortunately, there were no designated areas ever set. And so when our staff members would approach folks that were in hammocks, they were pretty upset, I would say, to say the least. Just why does this regulation exist? Where should we go? We're not doing any damage. So my colleagues and I did a detailed review of park systems throughout the nation, particularly focused in on the state, and found that regulations were pretty all over the board. So what we did was we picked and chose the best pieces of other regulations, as well as our own understanding of using a hammock in a tree, and produced what the regulation I have in front of me now. So the core focus for us was ensuring that the trees would be protected. And so to do that, we set a minimum diameter inch, and Jenny had asked that not everyone understands what a DBH is, so to give them some kind of frame of reference. And so that's why we put in about the size of a basketball. It's important that when you hang a hammock that you're choosing a tree that has relatively rough or furrowed bark, and that the type of straps that you're using to hang the hammock are at least about an inch thick so that it doesn't cut into the bark at all. Also within the policy, you will see that there are designations as far as how far they have to be from in a structure. So they wouldn't be able to set up like in a structure or a shelter or anything like that, as well as distance from roads and playgrounds and trails. We felt that would be important so that they're not interfering with any of the folks that are out there using the amenities that we have already provided. So it's a very passive recreational amenity. I have a hammock myself, I use it regularly. And so I feel like we have produced the best regulation that I've seen throughout the state and nation, a very comprehensive regulation. So with that, I will open it up to any questions, comments, or concerns.
On the trunk only, or can they hook up to a branch?
If the branch is 12 inches in diameter,
Then they can.
then they could, based on the regulation currently. You're not likely to find a branch that's 12 inches in diameter that's low enough to reach the hanger hammock. So I think in most part, we're going to see this on the trunks. We also limited use outside of our nature preserves so that folks aren't going off trail and trampling through areas that we're trying to protect and preserve.
I wish I could agree with you. I'm having a great deal of difficulty with this. I don't see how you're going to police it. And having experienced 2 deaths because of hammocks, I'm really have a negative opinion of this being used in a public park. It's fine on your private property, but I think we're asking for trouble. By any chance, are you going to label the trees with a ribbon that can have a hammock from them? Because to ask the public to understand the rules is virtually impossible, I think. And I just don't see how you're going to police it.
I would say at this point, the policing has largely just been by staff that see hammocks hanging, and then we walk up to them and say, you can't hang your hammock here. In my experience, the deaths that I'm aware of were largely attributed to the trees themselves that they were tying into. So that's why I made it a point to just make a note that prior to setting up your hammock, you should be doing some sort of tree inspection. So just looking up, is the tree alive? Looking down, is there fungal fruit? Is there other fungus on the tree trunk? All these are indicators that the tree is in decline, maybe not the best solution, or not the best tree to be tying into. Aside from that, as we implement this, we will be working with Rocky's team to do a video just to show how you actually hang up a hammock, what you're looking for whenever you are identifying what tree to use. And we can analyze looking at specific areas, and maybe that's part of the rollout that, we kind of set the standard for, this is a good distance between trees. This tree is at least 12 inches in diameter. You can see that the bark is furrowed. So this would be a great place to hang.
And to add on to that, at any time we create a new rule, or any rule in general, it requires us to educate the public. So we have had great discussions about producing videos that clearly state how the rule should be implemented. And we've talked about in key locations, placing signage or QR codes for the video. So we certainly understand and take on the responsibility that any new rule is going to require public education. Leash laws are one of the things that we always have to constantly approach our community members and inform them that there is in fact a law that guides the length of leash and that dogs must be on a leash. So for me, this would be the same amount of effort that needed for public education.
And to add to that, beyond just educating the public, educating our own staff, right? So exactly what they're looking for, what the regulation would be, and how they would approach the situation, I think is key.
Is it unreasonable or out of the realm of possibility for us to identify areas and trees and say, these are areas where it's permitted and here are trees that are acceptable, instead of leaving it totally to the public to make that judgment?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they did in Toledo. But where the designated areas were, from what I saw, were some prime time spots. They're right next to rivers and, just have low ecological value, things of that nature.
So we wouldn't do that. So we would look at it and say, this is a good area. This is a safe area. These are healthy trees for this activity. Is it reasonable for us to take that approach? So we minimize the possibility of people not understanding and not making good judgments about where they should be doing this.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if that might open this up to increased liability by identifying the area and then something happens within that area versus kind of putting the onus on the park user to determine where they want to play. Right. So, we do have designated playgrounds, we have designated ball fields, designated soccer areas, those sorts of things. But at the same time, someone can play kickball in an open field, right? So I think just for me, as a hammock user myself, I would prefer to have the ability to determine, where I want to set up, and based upon, again, I am an arborist, so I guess that it kind of negates that purpose. But I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility to identify those areas. I think for us, my intention and our intention with my colleagues to create this policy was to just open up the park system for people to kind of choose where they want to hang. So I think in order to, there's a lot of parks. There's a lot of parks that are next to people's residence and they can walk to. So if we were to need a site that only that is kind of our high priority parks or highly activated parks, I don't know that we might be leaving some areas out. And just, I don't know that the amount of work and responsibility that it would take to go to each park and identify a specific hammock place.
5,000 acres.
5,000 acres.
Right.
Well, Crystal, as you're looking at how you presented this to us, you've done research on other parks in the state or other policies that have been written, where does this policy as it's written stand in a scale? Are we pushing this to be more open, more free, or is this more locked down? Where would you put this in that?
So largely the policy is based off the same, it's a relatively the same policy as we find in Hamilton County parks. So folks that are passing between two park systems would have the same regulations. What I found at the state level is that there really aren't any regulations to guide it. I spoke to several park managers that run state parks. They say they see hammock users all the time. They don't feel like they need to regulate it, so they just, until that regulation comes about, they will just allow folks to use it wherever. I think for us, the biggest challenge has been to this past year was that people were setting up hammocks in the historic cherry grove. And so once you get into this, I would prefer to designate specific areas where you shouldn't.
Okay, that's fair.
Rather than, taking the detailed analysis of where you should.
Yeah.
So I think by limiting nature preserves, by limiting, special tree groves, by limiting folks outside of landscaping beds, I feel like what we've compiled here, I think, is the best policy for Cincinnati parks. And it and again, I think, like Kara mentioned, as we go through, once this policy is implemented, we do the public outreach, we'll spend the next year just, informing staff to keep an eye out, like, where are people using them?
Yeah.
And then really go and inspect and see, what were there any impacts to the trees? Could this be a potential designated spot? Because I feel like once people start to see people hanging up hammocks in given areas, they're more inclined to flock to that area.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Commissioner North, do you have any questions for Crystal?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
The one comment I would have when you're producing a video, I was really not aware. I was more focused on the damage to the trees instead of the damage to the people. But you may want to include some aspect of risk as it relates to when they're inspecting the tree. It says, look, this could fall on you and kill you if you don't pick the right tree, or at least make them somewhat aware that there is potential for bodily harm.
Absolutely. I see it as an opportunity for a public service announcement just about hazard trees and what to look for. So I would definitely use that opportunity to talk about, various tree characteristics. And if you see this tree, how to report it, how we can mitigate that hazard so that it's out of the system.
Great.
Thank you, Crystal.
One last question. In your comments, you said swings, but I didn't remember that as I was reading through.
So at the very beginning, we kept in place that no one shall put up or use any swing on CPB property except the use of provided playground equipment.
Okay, so this is hammocks. This is,
Hammocks and slack lines.
okay.
Great. Any other questions? I will entertain a motion if there is inclination to do so.
I'll move to accept the recommendation of staff to open up our parks for hammocks and slack lines, but no swings. right?
Swings are provided.
Swings are provided, right?
I'll second that motion. Any other discussion before we vote?
Just one thing.
Yeah.
When you have the educational videos and public service announcements, if you will, they will be posted on our website. And if I'm in the park, how will I know? What kind of provisions are you planning for educating people about what it is and what's not?
We had
If
spoken
I'm physically there.
Right, we had spoken to using signage and key designated areas to include just a statement of the regulation and the QR code that would link back to the website and in the video.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
No,
Commissioner Linder,
Yes.
Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kara, well, next agenda item is budgeting for 22.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Obviously, this is one of the bulk of the items that we'll be handling today. Excuse me. Just to kind of frame what I'll be presenting to you today is a request from the commissioners to consider 4 separate items. I'll speak to each of those and then we'll dive in. So the first item that I'm going to be asking the commissioners to consider today is to review a recommended adjustment to the capital improvement program budget. So this is something new. We've never done this before as a board. The board spends time each winter to produce an aspirational capital budget. That those dollars were not approved as we've asked, and we will be revisiting with the approved dollars with the staff's recommendation for expending those. The second item will refer to other additional dollars that the city council has appropriated for capital projects. We will then proceed into the commissioner's funds where the staff will present an operational budget and then an opportunity for a discussion on whether or not the commissioners would like to expend additional funds at this time. So I'll begin with the capital budget. So as I stated in December, this board approved an aspirational budget that was, or a recommended budget, and that was in excess of $4 million. The capital budget has been approved at $2,055,000. So what we have prepared for you is a recommended budget that allocates that to $2,055,000. And then staff also continued to identify items within the capital budget that we felt were important to proceed with and have provided some recommendations for external sources to fund that. So not everything that was included in the approved budget was included in this recommendation, but a good majority of it was, and specifically all of the items that were from the infrastructure study that we originally included are included in here as well. There is a spreadsheet that lays this out. It identifies dollars within the capital budgets, dollars we feel are appropriate to recommend coming from the commissioner's funds and other restricted dollars. And we are very happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Okay, so for clarity, we're looking at, yes, everybody's got this in front of you. What we are talking about now, what we'll take up first is the column on here that says proposed CIP spending. It totals at the bottom, $2,051,400. So there's some flexibility there. The other thing I'll note on here is that the highlighting, you'll see that Kara and her staff have gone through, and the things highlighted in yellow are all things that are identified as poor or fair condition on our latest infrastructure list. So I would like to open up then first conversation about the proposed allocation of the $2,055,000. I know I will make a comment that, again, this is a budget. This is not at this point in time approving every single line item on here. As we've discussed in the past, as items of significance come up, they should be brought to the board for review of the project itself. But what this lays out is for our planning purposes and for our staff that this is our intention and our objective for spending that $2,055,000. So for purposes of this discussion, if we could open it just for the $2,055,000. Are there any comments, questions on that? I just want to say I appreciate the approach that Kara and Craig and the staff have taken on this. I think this clearly lays out, for me at least, a few things. Number one, it highlights that we are definitely taking into consideration the needs that we have as outlined in the study that we just did. And I think this is a good tool for us to use and very straightforward. So if there's no discussion or questions on that, I would like to move that we approve the allocation in the budget as outlined on attachment B for the proposed CIP spending.
Just one point of clarification on utilities, 400,000 stormwater general repairs, and look at park site lighting repairs, and then down near the bottom, environmental services, testing, engineering. Those are all just like allocations for stuff that you need to look at throughout the year, or work that's projected to be done throughout the year, not necessarily specifically tied to, I mean, I'm sure there's some things that have created that number, some specific projects, but it's kind of a bucket to deal with those issues.
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I use that same type of specific discussion classification of buckets.
Buckets,
Yeah, I think it's exactly right.
Technical term, right?
Yeah. So I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to approve the
Second.
allocation? Second by Mr. Lindner. Any other discussion on just this specific area? If not, Mary, you want to take a roll call on this?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner,
Yes.
Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Carrie, you want to move to the next?
Do you want to proceed with the CIP in
We'll take it in the order what you would like here. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. That provides a lot of guidance for us, and we will begin expending those dollars. Some of the additional items in the capital improvement program that we identified can be extracted from the commissioner's funds. That would be the fourth column on that sheet.
And help me, how are you putting this in perspective with the items such as the fleet, the 724,000?
That's a fair question, and the answer was I wasn't. This was specifically looking at the capital budget that was previously approved, looking towards the commissioner's funds, primarily, except for, I believe, the Miles Edwards. They are all restricted funding, and we just took items that had been identified, that the commissioners had approved in December on a capital budget, and said that these portions of the capital budget could be funded with an appropriate restricted fund within the commissioner's fund.
For clarity then, what I would like to propose is let's talk about then the commissioner's fund. So we've now addressed the city's capital allocation. Now let's talk about the commissioner's fund. And what I've asked Kara to do is approach the commissioner's fund this year as somewhat of a bifurcated approach where what do we need from the commissioner's fund purely for operational things? What do we need to spend out of commissioner's fund just to keep the operations going? And then secondly, after we've done that, the availability of funds that we have, then broadly, what on a capital basis would we like to then spend that money on? So I would like to recommend, Kara, let's talk about the operational needs for the commissioner's fund.
Thank you very much. The next board report highlights all of the narratives and information that staff have prepared in order to present the commissioners with a recommended operational budget for the Commissioners Fund. That recommendation totals $1,922,815. This is approximately a $250,000 increase over the previous year. We felt that we were answering to some of the commissioners' desires from us in order to really look at the funds and say what is appropriate for an operational expenditure. We identified some large dollar ticket items, such as the delivery of mulch to our playgrounds, that account for a little bit of that increase. I would like to say before the commissioners deliberate on this, is that this process, under the direction of Craig Sherman, our CFO, and with the participation of every staff member, is a different budget than we've ever prepared before. This is a directly accountable divvied up budget where there will actually be budget owners for portions of the budget. This is something we have not done or have not done well before. So the staff did an incredible amount of work. That is one of your attachments where you can see all of those in terms of bureau, where you see those bureaus broken out. Each of those bureaus has one staff member that is responsible for overseeing that, them and their team under the guidance of their division manager. And we really feel that this is going to dramatically change our interaction and our ability to spend the dollars. So again, what you see there are the large buckets that are actually there and that are designated. There was thought put in, and you have that documentation. So again, the recommended budget is $1,922,815, and we are available to answer any questions.
Kara, if I could just start with a few highlights here. So when I'm looking at your table on the page, it's got the 3 columns. With the fiscal year 21 budget was $1.6 million, and then adjustments. And as you've noted, those adjustments along the way are for additional funds that have come in either through the Parks Foundation grants or from other items. But the things that I've noticed when I went through here, number one, the biggest difference between fiscal 21 and the adjusted one was professional services. And I believe that was related to funds that came in from the foundation for us to begin the architectural work related to lot 23 and 28. So I think that was the biggest difference there. When you compare then the fiscal 21 budget, the first column, taking out the extraordinary stuff, to the last column, that's where it looks like in what you're proposing out of the Commissioner's Fund. Equipment is increased by about $45,000. Is there anything specifically that you had in mind for that?
I'll ask the team to report on any specifics.
So the equipment is to help with the small equipment, feed eaters, blowers, tools for the horticultural staff to use on a regular basis.
Great. And then supplies, the main two differences are in supplies and horticultural supplies. Can you just generally say one is increased about $126,000 and one's $196,000?
Sure. Craig or Jenny, are you able to answer the specifics on that?
So that is mainly, the horticulture supplies are materials that the florists would need in order to increase the not only the number of beds, but the quality of the beds. So planting materials, plants themselves, in order to really grass. We just recently fully staffed our florist section, our horticultural section. So this is to support that increase and really boost up our plantings.
And President Getz, I will also offer, and we wrote it in the budget, but we started from the question of what does the staff need to do their job? So there was a wonderful discussion that ensued from that, where the staff was able to identify any shortcomings that they had. And so those are all
Great.
as well.
Super. I'll open up now.
What was the difference in the supplies? I got the horticultural ones, but the difference in just general supplies.
I think you could probably summarize that as what I just contributed. It was just the staff accounting for shortfalls
Just all-
in their
all the-
needs. Yeah.
Gotcha. Question for Jenny. Are you guys Steel, Husqvarna? What brand do you guys cater to?
We prefer steel.
Steel, okay. All right, just check.
Gotta love steel.
So Jenny, just a follow-up question for clarification on the horticulture supplies. And you mentioned increasing or improving the quality of the beds?
Yes.
Or are you planning for more beds or just the ones that we have to look better?
We're focusing on the ones that we have to make sure that they look better. Certainly going towards trying to use a lot of perennials so that there isn't that annual purchase every year. The florists are very eager and excited to get out there and really see everything that we have, how it can be redesigned or improved. And then after all that gets settled, which will take some time, I think, then we can certainly focus on if there are any new beds that we would like to do. But at this time, we're not interested in doing too many new beds because we want to be able to maintain what we have.
So do I understand that you're going to kind of be shifting a bit from annuals to perennials then in some of the beds to reduce the need for future costs of supplies or expenditure?
There will still be some annuals
Sure,
out there
yeah.
because that does certainly deliver a pop of color in some of the areas, but our focus is a lot on perennials and a lot on native plants.
How do you keep the deer from eating your hostel?
I will have to
Like a
refer
personal
to our horticulturalist.
As I drove by one park recently, and those hosta were just like giants, and beautiful bloom on them, everything.
My understanding is that
Share the knowledge.
the deer are pushed towards Hyde Park and Indian Hill is what I understand.
We secretly tell them to go to the residential.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Commissioner North, do you have any specific questions on these?
I do. Well, first of all, I'd say this is a really excellent document. And I do imagine there was a great deal of work putting all this together. And it is one of those documents that I'm going to put in my permanent file so I can come back and work with it because it's valuable going forward. One thing, I have focused on is trails, and obviously the expansion of trails, the connection of trail systems, and ultimately better signage for the trails, which we have some in here. And then some of the other city projects do provide some trail expansion and connectivity. Just a couple of questions. One thing that I think would be a nice to have is when we're talking about $500,000 of comprehensive trail signage, some understanding of actually how much trail signage that's going to deliver for us. That's a really massive budget. And I'd like to just have some data points on what we expect to achieve with that. And then secondly, Kara, maybe this gets into our strategic planning, but just as we talk about trails, there are a lot of things going on here. There are the city allocated budgets, the commissioner's funds, and then other budgets that are providing. It'd be really helpful for us to get some understanding of more broadly what we expect to accomplish this year with trails, and maybe some steps for next year and the following year. And I get that this is getting into a longer range plan, but my broad vision here is that we have a well-marked trail system that's obviously clean and safe, but that we've also got the availability on our website for people to access trails. And when they want to go hike in Cincinnati, they've got plenty of information available to them to go find that and do that.
If I could, I'd like to come back to both of those items. I think those are both clearly, and I think that is part of our next conversation about once we provide for the basic operations, then how are we going to spend the rest of our money? I think both of those If we could focus right now still on the operating, the three line items that we have here. Am I correct that those items that we just talked about are not in the 1.9 million?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct,
okay.
and we will address those.
Okay, so if we can focus right now on the 1.9 million, I do have a few comments to make. Number one, I fully agree that when you look at the Commissioner's Fund that we've got starting July 1 this year, and we compare it to where we were last year, we've increased the fund significantly. The Commissioner's Fund has grown by over 1.5 million. It's grown. Now we know some of that is because we've had a great market. Some of that money Craig has invested that hasn't been used. So some of it is invested and has generated almost $400,000 of unrealized gains. So just know that 400 is in there. I'm sorry, that's over $500,000. And then there's still 380,000 that's in there that we've earmarked for other things already. But that still leaves over $600,000 of just pure available money that has grown in the Commissioner's Fund. So because of that, I guess a few observations on that. Number one, that continues to be, I won't call it a frustration, but it continues to be a focus point for me, that we want to spend the money that we have available in these Commissioner's Funds. Having said that, I am very happy to see that you are proposing at least $250,000 more of spending out of our Commissioner's Fund than what you did last year. And I fully agree that spending it on things like horticultural needs and supplies to make the parks look great, I think I really appreciate that. And the other thing that I'll mention is that this does highlight to us that we've got $1.9 million of operating needs for this park that are not provided through the city's allocation process of the city's budget. So I think it's important for us to continue to focus on, if we did not have these endowment funds or these other sources of income, that's $1.9 million of operations that we could not fund. So those are the three things that I want to say on this, but I fully support the operational side, the 1.9 million, knowing that this is going towards things that we absolutely need to fund to keep the parks looking the way we want them to look. So if we could take up then the Commissioner's Fund, a request that we put an operational budget together representing the 1.9 million. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And is there
Second.
a second? Are there any questions? Is this clear to everybody what we're talking about here? Okay, then can we do a roll call vote on approving $1.9 million as presented by the staff out of the Commissioner's Funds for operational needs?
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner?
Yes.
Commissioner North?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
now I think we move into the rest of the story here, where we've now provided for operations, but we have other resources that we have remaining that we should talk about capital spending, either from our Commissioner's Fund or discussing the excess capital amounts, the extraordinary capital amounts that have been provided by the city. So Kara, how would you like to walk through that?
Well, first, thank you very much for your support on the operational budget. We greatly appreciate it. So in order to kind of summarize the documentation that we've given to you for your consideration. The first thing I wanted to provide you with to aid in this discussion was kind of an overview of your available resources. So one of the attachments in there does kind of just blanket say, here are the sum total of your available resources, so that you're aware of, as you're having discussions about expending some of those resources, how that would fit into the grand scheme. The items that staff had put forward, whether or not they were listed in the capital improvement program or they were listed in the support document, are opportunities that the staff feels are viable for discussion. Many of these items are operational in nature. They do not reflect programs that would need planning, design, anything like that. These are items that we've suggested, which can, be initiated right away. I would like to go into just a little bit of detail on the trail one that we've indicated since Commissioner North has specifically brought that up. Commissioner North, I feel that we can answer very successfully all of the questions, concerns, comments that you had. Right now, our Division of Natural Resources, under the efforts of our trail technician, a new hire for us, is already over 50% complete in the evaluation and identification of our trails utilizing a GIS service. We have anticipated a September-ish completion date where all of the data, including the trails, the trail conditions, the trail heads, the intersections, all of that will be fully mapped. That will specifically inform the number of signs, and will allow us to hone in on an exact price in order to accomplish this. We do believe that that number will rise close to $500,000. All of that information, Commissioner North, will present itself in opportunities for inclusion of trails on through the pages system on our website. It will allow for paper trail maps to be created. So everything that you have mentioned are things that are great concern for us, and we recognize as a deficiency. And that will, the work that is currently being done and the investment of the commissioner's dollars in the comprehensive trail signage program should accomplish everything that you referenced.
If I could just, one more thing to that is that that information will also be added onto our website. So people will be able to go on there, the digital GIS mapping, and see the trails there as well.
Great.
But that is one of a couple of options that staff are preparing for you. That is not there's not a targeted request there. These are options for your consideration, and we'll be happy to dive into any of those with you. Commissioner Hicks, did you say you wanted me to talk about the additional city dollars at this time?
Let's focus first on the opportunities that you've identified from the Commissioner's Fund. And I guess to put it in perspective, if you've got, again, going back to this spreadsheet that we reviewed earlier, the column that says proposed Commissioner Fund spending, can you help us understand, so the things that you've highlighted again, 30,000 for Alt Park Pavilion, 85,000 for, on Bettman is the 30,000. So we've got these items that you have identified there. In addition to those items you have proposed in the other write-up, there's 724,000 for fleet upgrades, $500,000 for what we were just talking about for the comprehensive trail signage, 150 for a dog park, 25 for Mount Airy Arboretum, and $258,000 for Crone Conservatory maintenance. What I would like for us to talk about today is part of this discussion can be had through our prioritization of what we were talking about a 3-year strategic plan. Are there items on here that we would want to address today, that we would say, yeah, of our remaining available funds, these are things that we want to say to staff, this has got our priority that we want to pursue. So having said that, if we look at the column that says proposed CF spending with the 30,000 at the top of the column, and then the items listed in the write-up being the fleet, the signage, the trail signage, et cetera, are there any discussions or questions that we would have for staff related to those? I think I'm hearing Molly in saying that clearly the $500,000 towards comprehensive signage is something that I believe, Molly, what you're saying is that's a priority that you would like us to focus on. Are there other things in there that we would like more information on?
So what you're directing us to do is to separate out what we should hold back on and wait for the 3-year strategic plan to decide their priority, as opposed to the here and now.
Yes. Are there things today that we would say, yeah, let's just peg that as a priority and have staff starting to work on it?
One for me is the Chrome Conservatory. Those things, as I read them, sound like safety kinds of things that we should be focused on and taking care of.
Very much. And that is coming out of a fund that, or it's been recommended to come out of the fund that can only be utilized for Crown
Yeah.
Conservatory.
So that would be a priority.
In the fleet situation, can you tick off which ones you need today? Or do you need them all today?
And before you answer that, maybe I'll chime in on that question. Seeing the document you sent us last night where there's,
Yeah.
is it 200,000 for this year or what is proposed for 2022?
Yeah, I would ask our Deputy Director, Jen Mobley, to speak to any
Yeah.
specifics regarding fleet.
Yeah, so the 200,000 for the fiscal year 21, the fiscal year 22 has not gone through the annual allocation yet.
So of the 21 budget of 200 and some thousand, do we have those trucks running on the street today?
No, they are not all running on the streets today. They are still under order.
Nobody's got any chips, right? They're still waiting.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Chips to put in the truck.
Are any of those identified 220 some thousand dollars of fleet? Are any of those included in what you're showing us for the 724,000?
No, they are not.
So the 724 is over and above what you guys are waiting for from previous year.
That is correct. Our current fleet situation right now is
Desperate.
Dire.
a complete nightmare, to be honest with you.
That's why I would have a high priority for this, because I think this just drags down productivity.
It absolutely does. It not only drags down our productivity, it is a daily and weekly struggle for staff to figure out which vehicle is operating, which vehicle is down, which vehicle are they going to borrow from either another division or from another employee within their own region, to figure out how they are going to get these crews out to just do their normal job. And it is affecting our park maintenance. It is greatly impacting not only the productivity, but it's also impacting our staff morale, to be honest, too.
Yeah.
They want to go out and do their job, but unfortunately, we just don't have their tools to do it. And, as you can see from the supplemental information that was presented to you, I believe yesterday evening, the new fleet supervisor has recognized that Parks has not been very supported in the capital allocation, but I am very nervous to rely on that annual allocation to get us back to the level of satisfaction.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's a catch-22. I absolutely see the need for us to be getting fleet equipment, trucks, whatever, to do the job that we have to do. I'm torn because this is an item that there is budget money established and allocated in the city's budget. And what we are basically saying here is that the city has not given us the funds to keep our fleet operational. And so we're, it's the catch 2022 that we've got to, because we have our own money, we have to spend it to do what the city has not done.
I agree. It's kind of, they're forcing our hand to holding us hostage to some extent, I would say.
What I would propose, and I agree with all of you, and I think we're in agreement that we've got to give our staff the tools that they need to do the job. We can't operate 5,000 acres of park property when we've got Band-Aids on equipment or they're sitting in facilities to be repaired. But I would recommend that we do this, but take this to City Council, this specific issue that we are doing this out of our private funds. And perhaps one of the areas that I would like to focus on is if there is a budget excess, which there typically is every year, that this be an item that the park board goes to City Council and says, if you have budget excess from fiscal 21, that we would like for you to reimburse us the $700,000 that we are putting out here, or recommending that we put out from our funds.
That is a great idea.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Jenny, historically, have we been underfunded from a fleet perspective?
Yes, the sheet that I have given you, well, in fiscal year 17, I should say, we did receive $300,000. It has gone down since then. Like I said, a new fleet manager came in, I believe at the beginning of fiscal year 21. She recognized that, for the past 2 years, we were only receiving $30,000 for our fleet allocation, which hardly supports one truck. It was used to mainly try to get some of our motors, other things like that, repaired or replaced. And I should say replaced, not repaired. But it was also explained to me that, there was a high priority for first responders, and I understand the importance of that, throughout our city as well. But we are bleeding bad.
You can't take out of a hole this deep at $200,000 a year with the size of fleet that we have. That's just, just not going to happen.
Not at all. I mean, just this week, we had 2 vehicles go down, which caused us to have to, it's every week. They are juggling different. When it gets repaired and that gets replaced and another goes down. We had a vehicle, a landscape truck yesterday, the brake lines caught on fire. We had our only packer that we have up and running. We have 3, we only have 1 up and running. The only packer that is operating, the antifreeze line, broke a little bit. They did temporarily repair it to finish our trash route, but now it is also down for repair. Fleet Services is doing a great job in trying to get those up and running and repaired, but there's obviously a backlog.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I think we get the picture, and I appreciate, in my mind, I know I'm sounding like I'm bashing the city, but I'm not. Part of the responsibility of this board is to ensure that the city understands what we need. So that's why I would just say that, that's why I would say that we need to make the council aware of our situation like that. But so I think as we look at it, then I think we've said, and we'll come up with that. What I'd like to do is come up with a motion at the end covering what we've discussed, but I think we're all in agreement on the 724. Is there additional discussion on the 500,000 for trail signage? I think that is a very worthy, the Crone can, go ahead.
Just clarity, trailheads, intersections, interpretive signage. That's kind of the gist of it. So, and then some kind of accessible mapping system electronically or digitally that people can either look and check out on the website or on their phone.
Yeah, a lot of that work will be done by our graphic design team under Raffimer's guidance, and we were even having, I mean, we've had a lot of really wonderful conversations on this. We're looking at potentially a color-coded system. And then one of the things that we've addressed is for individuals to experience color blindness, to have a QR code available where we have an additional map that's maybe numbered. So we really put a lot of thought in this, and this would be an incredible investment, and we would be certainly greatly supportive of it.
Well, and at some point when we get to that point, to be able to have feedback or a presentation to us when you are, and we're all sort of distracted here, but
I know,
customers
Mr. Burns.
swinging from the ceiling.
If it doesn't work, that's okay. Thank you.
I too am wondering what's going on in there.
Yeah, we're all looking up. Okay.
It's getting a little stifling.
Okay.
Here,
So let's move forward. Also, we've heard about the Crone Conservatory.
Yes.
I know we need long-term significant work done on that, but I think what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing here is that this is needed today to even get us to a point where we're sustaining to a point where we can do major repairs. Okay. Arboretum
Yes.
revitalization.
I'd love to make a quick comment on that. This is something that has grown closer to my heart. It is an area of our park system that, you know, was world renowned in its contribution to our city. And over the last several decades, it's just been maintained to a nice standard, but it's certainly not the gem that it once was. This truly is something that with a small amount of investment can rise back to the level of being something that we shout from the rooftops about. While I do not think that a full $25,000 will get us back there, we currently have a horticulturalist in place who's incredibly passionate, incredibly knowledgeable, and can make a significant impact for this amount of money. I know that it is a relatively small dollar amount in association with the other dollars, but I do think that this would be a wonderful, immediate impact in allocation of these dollars.
Super.
And bingo, we're down to the door.
And I would just make a comment that I would propose we not do anything on the dollar amount for dog parks today until we come to a decision on that. So that's just my gut feel. Anything on the schedule, going back to that, Carol, where we've got Bettman HVAC upgrades, these look like basic things that need to be done.
They are. They were just items that we were unable to fund in the capital allocation that were originally on the capital budget that we identified an appropriate commissioner's fund.
Okay. Then I'm trying to keep this focused here. So as we are looking at opportunities today of saying, let's allocate funding from our commissioner's fund. We've got the $162,000 that is the total of this column that includes the Bettman HVAC, et cetera. We've got $724 for fleet. We've got $500,000 for trail signage, $25 for the arboretum, and $258 for Crone Conservatory. Are there any other items today that you, as a commissioner, would say, here's money that I'm ready today to allocate out of our commissioner's fund? I don't either. So unless I hear differently, I would like to put that in a motion form for those items that we just talked through, if that's, I'm sorry if I'm monopolizing this conversation. I'm trying to focus us on this. I would like to then make a motion to the commissioners that we approve the items listed on attachment B for proposed spending of $162,500, that we allocate and approve the $724,000 of fleet replacements, that we approve the $500,000 budget for trail signage, $25,000 as requested for the Mount Airy Arboretum, and $258,000 for funding for repairs to Crone Conservatory. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional discussion on that? And I want to make sure we're all, Molly, are you okay with that?
I just have one question, Jim. This will be for Kara. If we have capital items that percolate in the year, would we just push them to next year? Let's just say, for instance, the community came forward and said, we want to save the owl's nest, but the park board has to come up with a couple $100,000 to do that. I'm not even saying I would support that, but for instance, how do we treat those things?
I think that, and in some of my conversations with the other commissioners this week, is that we have not yet really truly locked in on how we'd like to approach that. The staff have put forward a community request process. We're still evaluating whether or not that program is going to be successful in giving us the tools that we need. I think there's a real opportunity in the strategic planning process. We're going to have to establish some sort of strategy or guidelines for how the park board will make priorities or will identify priorities. And I think that the question that you just asked is most appropriate to be answered then. I think in the meantime, we are able to say we are about to engage in a strategic planning process. And then hopefully as a result of that planning process, we will have a tool that we will use consistently. And whether or not that answer is we'll consider everything today as it comes up, or we'll consider things on an annual basis. I believe that the strategic planning process will help define that for us.
Great. I do acknowledge that everything that's here is certainly worthy of the budget we're approving today or proposing to approve, but also that as a park board, this isn't a very proactive approach from the board. It really is responsive to what you're highlighting here. So I am looking forward to getting through that planning process, which I think will allow us to have speak more into what we as a park board would like to see staff prioritize.
And Commissioner, I fully agree with you. I know from my perspective, what we've done today is, I think it's, in doing it in my head, I think it's only about 1.2 million of what we will call capital, even though some of it is like repairs to Crone, that sort of thing. We've just allocated 1.2 million of funds that are available to us. I don't think that this precludes us from approving other things that come up, such as, and you mentioned Owl's Nest. If a proposal came back on Owl's Nest, we've got funds available to address those things. And I don't think we would be limited to once a year, here's our shot at allocating funds. So to your point, I think the only thing I'll take exception with what you said, I do think the trail signage is being proactive. I think that is not, it is reacting to a community need, and I think that is being proactive. But I think we've got opportunities that we're not locking ourselves in here to only these things for the upcoming year.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would just add that I think the Mount Airy Arboretum revitalization is also proactive. I mean, being able to kind of turn the tide from, I don't know, decades of call it maintenance versus, and from my sense, it's, we're kind of, this is a start, an ante into the commitment to, get that back to its original glory, I guess. Which to me, I'm really excited about that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Mary, can you do a roll call?
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Linder?
Yes.
Commissioner North?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The one last piece we have on budget before we move forward. Kara, can you walk us through what you would like to discuss on funding provided by the city for additional projects?
Sure, and I will also just remind you that there's still one piece of the other capital budget that we have, which is the restricted funding that has been recommended to support the annual capital budget.
Well, this is perplexing to me from the standpoint that we have one commissioner's fund. And whether it's restricted or not,
I'm sorry, these are city restricted funds.
city restricted
Yeah,
funds. Okay.
it's on the attachment B of the capital budget, and it's the last few columns. So I'm happy to address those at the moment, or go into what you have just requested from
Help
me.
me, give me a
This
page
is the
number.
proposed other spending.
Proposed other spending, yes.
The last two columns,
Again, on this schedule.
Okay, so it's back on this,
back on the same schedule,
page 16, correct?
totaling $410,000.
So this is, again, identifying items that you had approved in the budget in December. They obviously did not make our cut for the 2 million for the requested in commissioners' funds. These are additional funds that we have identified that can come from restricted funds, which have a very small, or I'm sorry, the city funds, additional funds that we have.
And 752 is what?
That is the,
Permanent improvement funds?
yes,
Okay. All right. So let me try and frame this. So from a terminology standpoint, we approved as a park board a requested budget for capital to the city earlier this year. What we got back from the city was a 2.05. So what you're requesting is at about $410,000 of items that we had put into our budget request for capital that did not get funded. So I'm saying that correctly. Okay. Are there any specific questions? I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory on the schedule.
The one that just kept coming up for me was the parking lot restoration at Sawyer Point, and how it doesn't get addressed in any of these, and I wonder what was the thinking?
That was a personal decision of mine. Can somebody guide me? I know it's on here, but I
Yeah.
can't.
Circulation, it's in yellow.
Right around here.
So that was a personal decision of mine in weighing what to recommend to you today. I believe there will be an opportunity in the near future to discuss that site in its totality. And I believe that, although I'm not saying that's not an important investment, I believe in the next several months, we'll have an opportunity to discuss that area in its holistically.
Okay,
And that's why I did not include it. in this.
okay. All right.
$100,000 for the Mount Airy ADA walkway. Is that $100,000 is what that's going to cost us?
The current design of that area 23 has not yet been finalized, have not come in front of you for finalization. It's a significant walkway. It is that area. It basically would be a walkway that comes from the parking lot and then extends down to the restroom and the shelter. I do believe that it will get close to that. My hope is that it will not take off that.
Okay. I think the other thing, so if you're looking at, the 10 million, the $10,000, I'm not going to, 150,000 for the comfort station. I think we've talked about that before in regards to development of the whole bike skills area. General repairs for water features. It's a big number. It's a general repair, but I do know that those are very expensive fixtures that they make a big splash, so to speak, but they also have a big dollar associated with them. I'm personally comfortable, but I will open it to you guys what your pleasure is to approve an additional 400 out of our commissioner's fund.
I have no comments or questions. Good with it.
Are there any strong objections? I'll put it that way, if we approve those items. Then I would recommend, and I'll just go ahead and I'll move that we approve the items, the 400,000 on attachment B, coming out of the restricted city funds as identified in the schedule.
Second.
There's no questions. Can we do a roll call, Mary?
President Betts?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Linder?
Yes.
Commissioner North?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So Kara, we've got one last thing, right?
Yeah, and President Getz, I'd just like to address the commissioners real quick and say thank you. Thank you for your support. I feel that this represents kind of the sum total of many conversations that we've had. And I'd like to thank my team who put in a lot of thought and effort. We work together, but it is their ingenuity, it is their insights into the needs. And just really want to thank you. Today was an incredible moment in an investment in our parks and our staff and in the services that we offer the community. So I just want to say thank you very much. I look forward to furthering that discussion to the strategic plan.
And Kara, not to belabor it, but to belabor it, I also want to say, I think what we've done today is we've done some key things. We've identified funding for significant amount of repairs that have been identified in our infrastructure report. We have done that. I think what we have done is stepped up and said, let's provide our staff with the equipment they need. And I think we've also said, what can we do as a commission to spend some of our money on things that will make a difference in the city and in our parks. So I want to make sure that we also thank you guys for presenting it to us.
Now I'm ready. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay, the last item in front of you is specifically related to the additional capital dollars that the city council appropriated. These dollars are listed extremely vaguely in the city budget. There's a sentence or two that goes along with the title heading. The document, which is attachment A of the capital budget board report, is staff's attempt to provide you with a sound recommendation on how we would recommend that the dollar allocation be spent. We are more than happy to speak with you about any of those allocations, but again, this is a staff recommendation for expenditure of the city issued funds.
And what page are you referencing?
This is
21.
This is page 14.
Turn the page before the schedule we've been looking at.
Yes, right before that schedule.
It's got attachment.
Oh, it's this one. You've got the other side of that.
Yeah.
This one.
Okay.
Oh,
No, it's not.
It's got attachment A.
It's-
up in the right
There's
hand corner.
attachment A.
Yeah.
Okay, let me look.
It is page 14.
It's
right?
page
It is
14.
page 14.
Welcome to my copy if you'd like.
Here we go.
Here.
It's just
Thank you.
lots of
Yeah,
pages.
I saw that one somewhere. Thank you.
The one question I had on related to the number 2, 750,000 for trail system master plan. When I looked at master plan 750,000, I got confused. I want to make sure that what we're talking about is 75,000 would go to the actual design, so to speak, or the plan. But then the remaining 675,000 is actually doing them. Is that correct? Okay. And as we've discussed, the 150,000 for the rapid run to Durham, to Dunham, we've talked about a much bigger project for that, but that bigger project would be a paved trail, where this, from my understanding in reading it, is this is putting down natural surface on an existing trail between the two, but just to enhance that trail.
And it would not inhibit the development of that plan for.
Okay. So Kara, what do we need to do on any of this?
I don't know that you need to do anything, although I think I certainly would appreciate the consideration and potentially a motion from the commissioners. I said, this is a tricky one. We've never been here before. The dollars were appropriated under extremely vague circumstances, and this is just our best attempt to be accountable to you on how we, and really looking for any agreement or concerns from the commissioners that you have in our recommendation for spending the dollars.
I don't see anything personally. Is there anything that
So,
you all?
I just want to clarify, Sawyer Point tennis courts improvement. 250,000.
That has not yet come in front of you formally, as you've heard from the individuals who are championing that, so that has been
It
allocated.
has to do with the pickleball courts
Pickleball.
being developed
Yes,
on top of the existing tennis courts, right?
and the seismic studies that are being
Right, done as.
completed will inform then the project recommendation that would come in front of the board, of which you would have a capital resource to identify that project.
So again, from my perspective today, all we are doing is giving a nod that this is how, from a budgetary standpoint, this is how we would approach the budget. It's not approval of any specific project yet until we get. Molly?
I have one comment on the Mount Airy Trails expansion. I see here, Kara, that it says we're looking at a 30-mile trail redevelopment plan. I'm just going to kind of go far out there and mention that one idea that's come up is the opportunity in Mount Airy to develop and brand a marathon trail that would be 26.2 miles, which would be a huge attractor for the city to have something like that. And I just don't want to, with a significant amount of money, I don't want to miss an opportunity to really create a significant regional draw to this, what is really a regional attraction. So I think with this funding, there's a real opportunity here to do even more than trails, which trails themselves, in my opinion, would be good enough. But this is really exciting. So I just want to toss that out there for consideration.
Well, and I think that's, I think to your point, Commissioner, then I think what we want, I think the point should be that we are giving you is as those, that we are part of the stakeholders and that the concept of a marathon trail be presented with the stakeholders as you're looking at developing the plan. Is that correct, Molly? Is that your point? Is that?
Thank you, Jim. It is.
Okay. I think that's good.
Is back to the Mount Airy trail, the paved multi-use extending from the skills course, is that in addition to the 150,000?
Yes.
But that's more, that's not, the whole thing is not 450,000.
No, the walkway that you just approved previously, specific to Area 23, will be a 5-foot wide pathway that will provide accessible access to the restroom facility. This is a segment of, I believe you saw it the previous time, the concept of a 10-foot wide paved trail going throughout the perimeter of the entirety of Mount Airy Trails. That was a part of our original request. We were funding that had a $4 million price tag. This is a trail spur, a trail segment, because the gate at the oval, once the Area 23 is developed, will remain open. This will provide a safe
So
off-road
this is an
space.
alternate, so they don't
Yes.
have to walk on the street.
Yes, and it's just a spur or a segment of if we are ever able to finance the completion of the trail.
Okay.
Yep. I would like to, then let's keep going. I'll make a motion that we approve the recommended budget allocation as identified by staff.
Second that.
Second by Commissioner. Any other discussion on this? Roll call?
President Hicks,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes,
Commissioner Linder, Commissioner North,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you all. That was a lot of work. I appreciate everybody's input, and I think it's a great move forward for the parks today. So thank you. Okay. Next topic, Karen.
All right, in return to some old business, staff today are pleased to present you with kind of a continuation of the discussion regarding a dog park in the Clifton community. As you are aware, this is a conversation that we've been having for several months at this time, and I will take you through some of the details here. Staff have summarized the project as it has been engaged with to date, and then also provided a list of 7 viable sites, or the winds change every day, but we are looking at the potential for about 7 viable sites. A wonderful graphic has been included there that demonstrates to me 2 things. One, it demonstrates that I do not think that any site is perfect, but it allows us to clearly see where there will be any shortfalls, things we could potentially accommodate for. But this is the summation, this graphic itself is the summation of months of work. It is the result of community engagement. It is a result of staff review of sites. What we are asking for the commissioners today is for your consideration of those sites. Ultimately, what I would like to do on their behalf of following this meeting today would be to look at 2 or 3 sites, so the potential to get this list down to 2 or 3 sites. And then I'd like to engage in what I'm calling a prototype, which would be to put stakes in the ground at these locations to kind of show the perimeter of where a park would be. And then allow the comment to produce some qualitative feedback for us to consider, and then produce a recommendation for you next month. So again, we are ready to answer any questions on your behalf. Again, these sites do take into consideration some criteria that staff has identified, and we are all ears and ready to engage in a discussion with you to hopefully narrow this list down today.
Thank you. I'll just start off, and then I want to let everybody, I appreciate the work that's gone in. I do want to identify that the graphs that have been presented are very subjective. And I think as we've seen from input that we've gotten from the community since this has been brought forward, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and where I think there are definitely X's and checks. I would not take those as objective, but subjective evaluations by whoever put this together. But having said that, I'll just open it up to questions that the commission might have regarding the sites.
Commissioner Getz, President Getz, just a couple of comments. I've walked all of these and studied them in great depth, and know each of these sites intimately. And I think it's been suggested that we narrow this to 2 so that we can pursue those. And I would just like to propose, the second one can be picked, but I really have concluded that there's one very perfect location, which is the northeast corner. And I'd like just to present a couple thoughts on that. The northeast corner of Burnett Woods.
Okay.
This is a nice wooded area that's adjacent to a municipal area. It says here that it's in close proximity to homes. It is next to a kind of historic condo development, but I think that there could be sufficient space between that condo development and the dog park that's proposed. For a variety of other reasons, I don't think that many of these fit well. The Burnett Woods Valley, while it would appear on this sheet to be ideal, it is an area that often gets flooded. It's also next to a shelter area that's regularly used for recreation, I think it would directly conflict with that. I know that there's been a lot of support for it looks like you've totally taken off of here the area that's there along MLK. Oh no, this is the MLK site. I know that there's been a lot of support from the neighborhood on this. We've seen that in the feedback. I think
It's
there's
still there, yeah.
complexities with that. So I would just like to elevate the northeast corner for consideration by the other commissioners here.
Because I have more of a question than a point of view. I'm just wondering how important being central to in this circle, is that a fairly heavy factor to consider, or are we just saying that basically anything within that circle is fair game and would be a satisfactory location? To Molly's point, I mean, dead center is Burnett Woods. Some of the other ones that maybe have some positive checks and things about them are kind of on the periphery, and I don't know from an accessibility point of view where that lies in the consideration.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, when you step back and say, what was the genesis of this whole discussion? It was Clifton neighbors that wanted to walk to a dog park. Right. So I had the same reaction when I saw this. I mean, I don't think in my mind, a dog park in Fairview is a bad idea. I don't think a potential dog park in the Triangle, that's way out on number 4, I guess it is. I won't say anything negative about those, but it doesn't meet, to your point, the initial genesis for this was a walkability, walk to dog park in Clifton.
It seems more people would be able to walk to Burnett Woods with their dog than to the Triangle or Fairview.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I would, other input.
The water access, is that for humans or is that for dogs or is that for cleaning up or what is the need for water?
All of the above. I think it had previously been identified as a desirable, and it is. It's worthy of consideration. And if it's not currently accessible, I think conversations about how we could get water to a site. Dogs play really hard, and a lot of them play for a long time, and they're pet parents. They're out there for a while. I think it's. And if it is not currently accessible at the site, I think it's worthy of a discussion about if and how we can bring it there.
It's a necessity.
I think it's a highly desirable amenity.
When I looked at these, and unlike Molly, I think the Triangle was at one of my lowest ones. And it was primarily aesthetically driven. Because I drive that stretch all the time. And that Triangle, as it stands right now, is a very attractive piece of greenery. And I'm thinking, how is that going to change if we put a dog park in there? So that was my concern. The number one for me was MLK, recognizing that the water source is not there now. The question for me was, I understand, it seems like it's more than a desirable in the dog park. You got dogs running around. I think you need water. So the question for me was, what would it take to make that available? And if that were the case, that would be my preferred one. And I looked at this and I said, Denora Park would be off the table based on everything we've heard about it so far. It just didn't seem like it should. I mean, we put it on here because that's where we started, but I don't think that would not be a consideration for me.
I'll just add, as Molly, I also have actually gone and walked each of these locations just to have a good perspective. And to answer, and I was hoping, because the neighborhood, there was strong support to evaluate what is called the MLK site here. The issues that are not presented, that when you look at a drawing, number one, this drawing does not, the one that is of MLK is not indicative of what reality is there at that site. And it is a site where you see parking and all of that. That whole area there is owned by Good Samaritan Hospital. That's not even owned by the city. And Good Samaritan Hospital has told the parks within the past month that they're going to use that whole corner there as the staging area for significant construction work that's going on their campus at the Good Sam Hospital. So you don't have any access to what the drawing is here of the dog park. You have no parking. When you look at the site itself, the actuality does not match what this design says in attachment C. This sits down in a gully very, very far. So we would have to build somehow stairs where you see hillside. That hillside is really half of the distance that we show here to tree line. I actually went out and took pictures. And what we're talking about is very steep area. And one of the very first criteria that's listed is relatively flat. And this is 50% of this is not flat. It is a hillside that goes down that somehow we would have to, and the lower level where it flattens out at the bottom just before this tree line is usually brown because that's where water accumulates down there off of this overflow. And we've heard a lot of discussion about how busy Ludlow Avenue is and how dangerous that would be for a dog. Well, MLK is about 10 times, if not more, busier than what Ludlow is. And also it says parking is going to be a real issue. There is no parking anywhere around where we're talking about putting that dog park in. So it would have to be people walking there with their dogs along MLK or down Whitfield or something. But there is, the site used to be houses, and they were torn down when MLK was redesigned and rebuilt. And the area that the house sat on, the flat area, is where you now see MLK and the sidewalk there. The rest of it goes straight down. And you can see in the structure, the picture, the overhead picture, it's nowhere near this amount. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, I have a hard time envisioning that is a viable spot, particularly because Good Sam has said for 2 years it's going to be a construction staging site, which then gives us no access to the rest of the property to the west of the parking.
A question on the size, does that represent the entire parcel?
It was intended to represent the envisioned square footage for the
park itself. So to Jim's point on MLK, that 76,000 square feet would be the bottom section, not the hillsides, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's what, an acre and a half roughly. And does that, I'm not familiar.
It's an
with
acre and a
site.
half of unusable space. It
So
goes
the
straight
flat
down.
part is not an acre and a half.
I'm not an engineer, but
Don't dog park, don't dogs like to run up and down hills?
my most concern would be just how you get down there
Well, I
and the
mean,
water
if
that's.
you have to spend $300,000 for stairs down to it, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a non-starter, I think.
I just drove past there the other day. And when I looked at it, I thought, oh, that's nice. It's recessed. It's not on the street. And it didn't seem to me, when I looked at it and just saw the flats of it, and of course it goes down like that, but I thought the flat part was sufficient.
The sufficient flats part is what is owned by Good Sam. Yeah, that's, yeah. So if you
I
look
would
here,
agree that Demore probably is, off the list, just from the standpoint of it's the smallest. And if you can do it, you may as well have a park that handles some significant dollars.
I just wish we got more positive comment from the folks. All we've heard is negative
Yeah,
comment.
it's not my background, right?
I'm just wondering if we're not spinning our wheels a bit.
well,
Because if indeed it does look like the Burnett Woods site is a good site, and good luck.
well, I will point out, we did the survey, and the survey did show majority of people that replied wanted a dog park. Of the comments that we have received over the past several months, everybody agrees a dog park would be great, just not at the site that I have a problem with. And there was comments, I mean, we had part of our package last month when this was on the agenda, where it did talk about, it was from an actual CTM member, who's also a member of Preserve Burnett Woods, that has been very active with the Parks Committee and very active with parks. And he implored us, he said, I believe the voices of the majority of the community suffer from a lack of organization and possibly the will to fight against the very well organized and active opponents to development of anything in Clifton Parks. And I believe it is time that the Park Board stands up and begins to do the work required to make Burnett Woods a park for the whole community. A dog park in Burnett Woods would be a wonderful first step. I only bring that one comment out from the standpoint that there are a lot of positive comments. I know I live in the Clifton area, and though I take a lot of arrows, I do hear, I sit on my porch and see the number of people walking by with dogs in the community. And the comments that I receive personally is how much a dog park would be valued. So I would just argue that this is an opportunity for the park board to be proactive and do a positive step rather than reacting either to people that don't want something or reacting to somebody that says you have to do this. I think it's an opportunity for us to provide to a neighborhood that approached us with an opportunity to do something in one of our parks.
Well said.
Well, and when you look at it just from the circle picture, it's the most centrally located. It has the largest amount of space, so it's not, absorbing or transforming, the smaller options totally into a dog park. It's a little chunk of it that, it's an amenity in a much larger park. And yeah, I just have a hard time not focusing on the centrality of it and the ability for people to access it from all, to your earlier comment, walking a dog and I'm okay, versus if I'm on any side of say if I'm on the far side of the south, the southwest side, I can have a pleasant walk with my dog through Burnett Woods, get into the dog park, let him run, and then, come back. So, it's, to me, those are some, I think, important
So
aspects.
I kind of conclude that we're all in agreement, it's 6. number 6.
Yes, I have that one circled.
Yeah, that we should, is where we should focus our attention, and that where staff should focus their attention. That we don't need to choose two. It seems that there's one that, yeah, is outstanding.
So Molly, you had said number 7, that's where it floods, right?
Yeah,
And then,
I think on paper that looks like a good site, but in reality, if you visited the site, you see that it's next to all the shelter areas where picnics are common in the summer. And yes, it gets very wet, and in
what about?
especially wet times, it floods.
What's the rub on what is that, the southwest?
You know, that is a very, very highly trafficked corner.
Okay.
It is, you know, it's the intersection of Clifton and MLK, and you probably
That's
know
where
the
the
intersection
CAC
well.
Yes.
building
Right,
is.
that's where they want
Yeah,
it.
okay.
And it's a very flat area.
Yeah.
It's very exposed, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I have the same perspective as Molly from the standpoint that I see a clear possibility with one. I'm having a hard time coming up with number 2, only from the standpoint of the options that are here in front of us. And I don't know why we would focus on what is Plan B if we've got one clear.
Well, maybe I'll make a recommendation at this point, if that's okay for that, guys. You know, getting to this moment, getting to, you know, one preferred option has represented a lot of hard work, all the work that went into getting to this discussion and all the work that you guys just did as well in order to focus on this. To an earlier comment that you made, President Getz, on, you know, not considering the expenditure at this moment. I think there's an opportunity to just acknowledge that that is the desired location of the commissioners. And then if you wanted to then tackle that in the strategic planning process to determine whether or not you'd like to fund it in its entirety, that may be an appropriate time to determine funding source of that project.
I would say we have now talked for 2 years about this. So to say now we're going to take it to a strategic planning session, I would say no. Just my gut feel. I think we've now given you, I think we now go back to the community. I think your concept of laying out on the site, tacking down stakes or whatever, just to give a perspective, I say we move forward. And I think we do challenge the community for doing fundraising, gathering support, all of that stuff, and that we move forward. And then when it's at a point where it comes back to us with a proposal for here's how much we think it'll cost, et cetera, then we can consider it.
But I think you have to get a guesstimate on the cost.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, stake it and
Because, I mean, to get a sense of what it's going to take to get water to the location. And then, is there a particular point of view as it relates to hard surface versus, I guess, what natural surface? Is one better than the other from a dog owner's perspective, or versus a dog park operator's perspective?
It's really site specific, and I believe that the conversations that have been had amongst this board is to look towards more of a Washington Park, a Westwood Town Park model, which is predominantly a built environment. I think that site provides some opportunities for maybe a mixed use, you know, built where there would be heavier traffic and maybe, you know, open space, but it's not. I'm not a designer, but I think that there probably could be an opportunity for an intermix of those at that site.
So we're to decide today is, I think that's where we're coming to, that is the recommendation we want to put forward to the community. What is the immediate next step in terms of getting the information together that makes for a useful discussion with the community?
Well, I believe, you know, following what was our previous plan, I think that because there has been an ideal site identified, we would begin that process of bringing together all that information, which I don't think we would have done until after the community input last time. So we can simultaneously be putting together, the forward-facing information, including the exact cost estimate, whether or not water would be there. And I think simultaneous to that, we can go out as we planned and stake the site and invite qualitative feedback. I think when we have those together over the next 30 days, we have those together, that will inform a great deal of proceeding forward.
Because I'm just wondering, and I'm all for feedback, but you can be feedback to death and paralyzed. And to your point, 2 years down the road, I think it's been a good process, but I'm just going to go out on a limb, and between now and the next 30 days, you're going to get a lot of angry people that don't want it. The feedback you're going to get is mostly, again, the active opponents of it, and the well-organized, or however the person phrased it, which was a very good phraseology. So I guess, I'm not sure what we're going to learn. I'm not saying we don't do it, but, and I think staking it out, people can visually see it. Maybe, I doubt you're going to change a lot of people's minds, but I think it's worth going through the effort. But I don't think you're going to get everybody going, well, you know what, you're right. That's the perfect place.
It's a really fair point, and in all fairness, I didn't expect so much consensus today. So it does call to question the process that we had planned out before versus moving forward. So maybe the answer is to just take that breath for the staff to be able to put together accurate information. And then we will come up with a way to share that and invite the community to inform how they would like to help us in this process.
Yeah.
We will do that.
If that means not going with a blank sheet of paper and say, let's build it together.
Yes.
But based on your expertise, your knowledge, to put forth a recommendation to which the community could respond.
Very good. Yes.
And timing.
Commissioner North, did you have?
Yeah, I just want to be clear that I understand what's next, which I think we're saying that staff is going to develop a concept for the park. And then will we also have a conceptual budget associated with that? So that if we, again, in concept, can wrap around $150,000 allocation by the park board, that if this were a $750,000 park, we are looking for someone to spearhead a $600,000 capital campaign. I have no idea what the numbers are. But when we talk about water and a built environment and fencing and all the things that go with it, this is not an inexpensive endeavor. So I think we want to understand that as well. I guess the other question I have is associated with, I think we'll want to understand the cost of ongoing maintenance of the park. Because obviously we're strained as a park board with keeping up. We just had a conversation about it, all of these facilities. So let's make sure that we consider that fully as well. And then my question would be on Linda's, what would we be able to see in 30 days or in 60 days to take this up again and take it to the next step?
Yeah, I would be comfortable committing that in 30 days we could produce that report. That had all of the information. I was taking down all the information that you just presented. So then I guess the question would be, would the board like to see that before we went to the community? That may inform the board further and say, these are the types of things that we'd like to support from the community. Here's the types of things that we would be willing to step up to. So I'll say it, please clarify if I'm interpreting what's being said wrong, is that at the July meeting, the board would, or the staff would present you with yes, sorry. At the August meeting, the staff would provide the commissioners with a full report on what it would take to construct, maintain a dog park at the northeast corner of Cornell.
I think the key is now we're looking for input back on the specifics of the project. We've now gone through the process of identifying the preferred site. So it's not the need to go back to the community for helping to identify the best spot. So now it's more identifying with the community input for what would you like to see in the dog park, and then what the cost would be.
Yeah, and I would just, in that kind of design aspect of it, I would think you might want to have some options that says, well, if it turns out to be a $750,000 project, what do you get for $500,000? And what do you get for $400,000? Because I'm not sure we're going to come up with it all. And we're not Santa Claus. We're not out there with the community saying, hey, tell us what you want. We'll provide anything and everything you want. Love to have a participatory aspect of this. And, that's an unknown, as to how much will be, raised or funded from additional sources. But hey, if everybody's up for what is good, better, best, kind of.
Well, that's what I know when we opened the Westwood Town Hall, at that point, Steve said to me that it would be somewhere between 100 and 125. Actually, he said a little lower at that point, but I've heard the number.
For the dog park?
For the dog park, 100 to 125 for the type of dog park that we did in Westwood, which was all synthetic with fencing and everything.
How big was that?
That's 10 or 11,000 square foot.
We're looking to get something twice that size.
Well, but we don't need to. And that was a comment that I had to your point.
Yeah.
This was drawn as a 20,000 square foot dog park, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, it could be a very beautiful 10 or 11,000 square foot dog park.
How big is Washington Park?
I'm unhired. Jenny, are you able to answer this for me? I'm so sorry.
Washington is even less.
Yeah.
Washington is less. Yeah.
So is there I assume there's a correlation of dog population and the size of park needed. If you've got a lot of dogs in the Clifton area, but not so much in downtown, you might need a 10,000, I'm just not sure whether a 10,000 foot park will, so what we don't want to do is underbuild and go.
Well, that's part of what I believe staff needs to come back. We're not,
Okay, so I will ask again, because when I had offered 30 days to you, I was thinking in terms of just like, we'll narrow things down and bring it back to you. But I would be very happy for staff and community to engage in kind of that conversation and then bring something back to you at a later date, maybe 60 days. Or what would you like to see from me as a deliverable next month?
I think you can come back in a 30-day period with an estimate for what we're talking about here. So
For
that
the
we,
20,000.
for the 20,000 with the option that if it were a 12,000, here's what it would cost. Again,
If she does, or if they do the 20,000 and it comes in at $200,000, then it's a non-issue. If it comes in at $1.5 million, then we can go out to the public or go down to about 500 feet, right?
So a cost estimate, kind of a reconceptualization of what can be included in that site. What are any of the barriers, or what would be the barrier to bringing water to the site? Anything else that you would
What would
like?
be the cost
Yeah, that's
of
the main
bringing
one.
water to the site?
Yes. Okay.
because I do feel we've got the public input for the past 2 years.
I
So,
do agree.
and each time that we have this on the agenda, we get the same comments back. So there's been nothing new.
Sure. Then we will return to the board with that information next month.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I guess just to that point, I would add that from a lot of the feedback I've gotten, because I've talked about those and heard, would be with regard to the other sites, where there's a lot of people that have a lot of anxiety about, is this going to go forward or not? I don't know what extent the board might want to consider that.
Cut them loose, so to speak. You
Yeah.
guys can rest easy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think that's,
As a result,
I
I
think
think
it's-
as a result of the conversation today. You know, this is now, you know, it's immediately public, live stream, and individuals will have it, and it will be reflected in our minutes as well.
okay, thank you. Our last discussion topic is capital improvement plan, the quarterly reports. Steve unfortunately had a family emergency issue that he couldn't be here today, but Kara, if you'd like to walk us through this.
Sure, I don't know that I was fully prepared to walk you through it today, other than to speak to what the document represents.
Yes.
This is a document that has been prepared, is maintained by our Division of Planning and Design. It is intended to capture the breadth of current projects that are being completed within the capital improvement program. It is intended to capture the status. It is a static view of the project at the state, where it is at in the process, and associated, there are some expenditures that are associated on that document. So it is, again, it is an attempt at a snapshot of where projects currently are at the moment.
So at this point, I know Steve's not here for direct questions, but are there any specific questions on capital projects or on the report that we're getting on a quarterly basis?
I just want to bring up the boat dock,
Yes, ma'am.
that all material was presented to the city and DEI on the 24th, correct? And here we are at the 15th, and we haven't heard anything back.
The 24th of what?
Yeah.
What,
June.
what year was that? That was.
Yeah.
I believe we've been in the current process since the turn of the year. I think it, and that is, and where it currently resides at this moment, it is still under the consideration of the purchasing department. As a result of that decision, an approval of the bids, or a recognition of the bids that were received, the next step would be for it to go to the established committee for consideration.
Referring to the MOU, weren't these things supposed to turn around in a 14-day?
Certain aspects of the process, right, Jim?
Well, and
Days.
I did go back and look at it, and I'm having a hard time identifying a 14-day clause in there. There are issues, it is addressed in the purchasing sides, but it says that approval would not be unreasonably withheld. There is no time frame listed in this. So I think, again, we go back to the whole topic of how we deal with the city procurement, you know, and how is that going? What are the issues that we've been identifying, and how do we move forward? Because obviously there's been several projects like this.
Filled with opportunities is.
Yeah.
Improvement.
So
Hurry up and wait.
I think there's an opportunity for us to revisit the terms of the MOU with the city.
well, I would state that this specific project has got a time situation on it to get accomplished and make it worth doing. And therefore, I think to not sort of put the hammer down
Right.
is a mistake on our part.
Certain things are going to disappear. Certain opportunities are going to pass us by
Exactly.
if things take too long. Other projects, it's just a matter of time. You know, Duck Creek restoration, that's not going to go away. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's I would say it's a different category of intensity or focus versus the boat dock. And maybe some of these other ones, but yeah, I mean, to me, that's, you know, I know we see that throughout, that certain people just don't, certain companies just don't even engage in these projects because, you know what, it's just too much work, it takes too much time, et cetera, et cetera. So there's, you know, the competitive field is narrowed, time is stretched out. And I understand, you know, transparency and everything has to be dotted and crossed and everything else, but I gotta believe there's a way to trim some time out of some of these turnaround or get some commitment, because I know you were very adamant that now we're just going to be part of the city as opposed to being a bit more nimble and responsive in previous times. And we've lost a lot of that. And, you know, I understand that we have to, you know, abide by certain rules, but I got to believe that there are ways to refine and shorten the process, if you will, so that each event is not its own unique thing, that certain things, you know, can be streamlined, I guess, if you will.
So in response to that, it used to be John Dewick who was our point man, and now it's,
Kelly Potter is our.
so do we lean on Kelly?
What I think for that specific project, I think whatever we can bring to bear to get the boat dock project moving or buttoned down or whatever it is, I think what you're hearing is that that's a project that we have great interest in getting to the bottom and getting it done. I think on the broader issue, I do think what I'm hearing, and I don't disagree, is that it's a good time to say, let's do a look back. Let's sit down with the three parties that are in the MOU, meaning the city, the park board, and the park foundation. A good time to sit together and say, okay, what's working, what's not. We haven't done that since we signed that back 3 years ago. I think maybe it is a good time to do that, because as you look through here, it's a continual issue that keeps coming up. Yeah. And so I think we need to sit down and just say, how can we improve this?
Commissioner, again, would you prefer, just in terms of timing, I feel like that conversation as a kind of a larger philosophical conversation is probably necessary to precede the details of how to accomplish something quicker, more quickly. I guess I would foresee that meeting being called together very soon, in the next couple of weeks.
Well, in my mind, there's two issues here. One is the specifics of the boat dock.
Yes.
That we got to keep pushing.
Yeah.
On the other, I think you've committed to us to come back in August with proposals for how we can improve working with. So I think that continues to go on. That's for our next meeting anyway.
Yes.
So let's take a look at that. And I don't know how quickly we can establish with the city manager and with the Parks Foundation when we can sit down and have so I wouldn't let the other two things wait for that.
Thank you for that clarification.
The general comments that I have is this report that we get on a quarterly basis still does not give commissioners a picture of projects. What we have here is a recap of what has been spent as a single number, not on a by project number. It doesn't tell us what the project is estimated to cost us. And it's just, my frustration is, again, I'm a financial guy. Columns don't add up. When they do, have a subtotal, which I don't know that there's any subtotals. They don't agree with the total. So there's a lot of just misinformation or just sloppy, I don't want to call it sloppy, just, it's not a good report. There's a lot of issues and errors on a report. And for me as a commissioner to take the time that I have to take to get information out of this is just not acceptable. So I think we still have to work on what is the reporting that we need to highlight our capital spending. And let me give you one example. We have next week our ribbon cutting for the Tom Jones Commons. If you look through this report, there is nowhere that this report says Tom Jones Commons, here's what the budget was, here's how much money has come in, here's how much we've spent, here's how much we remain to have open to be spent on the project. It's nowhere in here. And I would like perhaps use that as an exercise, that if you could come back to us, because that's the type of information I think we're looking for. And I would like to have that type of recap for our next meeting, since that project's going to be done and around ribbon cutting next week. But it's the same way with all the projects. Inwood Park, you see expenditures from funds for different years. All this is a recap of funds, fund accounting basically, but nowhere real project information. The last that I'll even say is that, and there's never dates on these reports. So this one looks like the one before and the one before. And if we could start putting dates on reports, I'd appreciate it. And it's something that obviously it's top priority of this commission to get projects done, to get things accomplished. And unfortunately, we don't have a tool with this report to see how we're doing. That's my only comments on it. And if Steve were here, I would have said the same thing.
And mine, in addition to what Commissioner Getz has outlined, the narrative piece to me helps me understand all the numbers. And then when the narrative doesn't work, then I'm really lost. And as an example, the how French administration building exterior painting, that seems pretty straightforward to me, like you paint. And it's been delayed, and it says the project was bid twice. I don't know what that means. What are the milestones? Did we hit them or not? If we didn't, what is the reason? And what is the impact on the final time? That kind of understanding would be helpful to me as I overview the project and then look at the numbers associated with it. And that's just one example. I think that's true for just about every one of these projects.
I'll echo that same one. You have in that same paragraph, it says budget 226,000, start date 9/20, completion date, the project's been bid twice. Then the very first sentence says work scheduled to start second week of July. So it's really not start date 9/20.
Yeah.
But to your point, Jim, looking at is it page 66, under French Park improvements, it says French house paint exterior, $20,000 for encumbrances. And it has just original budget is 20,000. So I'm confused. Is it 226,000 or is it?
Well, that's
20,000?
Yeah, you've hit on, that's the other funding for that is on other line items, but there's nowhere.
It doesn't roll up.
Doesn't roll up.
To a
Right.
overall project plan. It's
Right.
a piecemeal.
Yeah.
Look at it, I get it.
Yep.
And then the other piece of it for me is the action piece. So what is the next step? Is this one on Owl's Nest, Park Pavilion, the last sentence? A committee to discuss the issue further with staff. That just seems so incredibly vague with no specific intended outcome of those discussions. So it would be helpful to know those kinds of things. What is the plan? What is the timing? What is the expected outcome?
I thank you very much for your comments. This is a responsibility that you have asked for me, and it's a responsibility to owe you, and we will continue to investigate and make improvements.
Thank you.
Just like two questions, one of which is the results. Where are we at with the, I can't remember what it's called, but the shifting ground, the slippage along Friendship Park? What is, do we know what the situation is on that? Are we looking at something really severe?
Unfortunately, our experts are not with us today, but I'll attempt to recap. So we know that the original inclinometers were put in the ground. There was found to be enough movement to warrant a second round of them to go in. And there is an active ongoing conversation between ourselves, Waterworks, maybe MSD, because a project on that site, which will need to happen, is going to be a very large ticket item. And there are multiple city departments that will participate in that discussion and will likely distribute the expense associated.
Okay. But it's a big issue.
It will be.
Yeah.
It will be.
The only other thing I would say is, as we kind of talked about the dog park and potentially all the passion that's been exhibited, and hopefully that can be harnessed into some fundraising to help support that project.
Yeah.
I think a similar situation might be with Owl's Nest. That there's obviously, we saw a lot of passion about the building. That maybe if there's an opportunity to, I know we had $200 and some odd thousand slated for demo. If we could convert that along with some private funding that was raised to stabilize, not necessarily, turn it into its original state, but I think this is a great opportunity for us to partner with the community if they're willing to step up, which I would imagine there's a few people that would. That might be a great opportunity. It's another example of public-private cooperation to preserve something that's, I think, pretty dear to the neighbors there. Anyway. At least that's what we've heard.
I appreciate that perspective. We had an initial meeting with the community councils, and we have a follow-up meeting with a portion of individuals next week.
Super.
What about the fishing pier?
Again, I am unable to. I would certainly defer to my planning team. Jenny, do you have any?
No,
I'm sorry. The correct staff are not here to answer that for you. I can certainly give you that answer.
Just wanted to know.
Super. Okay. We are running tight on time. So Rocky, if you could give us your bottom line of what you want us to know.
I'll just stay on the podium this time. Yeah, I really just got a small list anyway. One is to let you know that, consistent with the rest of the city, all staff have now returned to work full time. So things are going well for the most part. Remember, nothing, coffee, share refrigerators, and all that. We also, as you can see in your packet, have tons of events that are underway, which is great. It's been a challenge. It's busy, whether those be events that we're running or events that are happening in the parks. Also want to mention, this is going to start soon, it's already almost reading time. So you'll recall, this comes around, we generally open the registration in August. We're working closely with Mad-Tree and the Parks Foundation. We're happy to say we picked up a new sponsor, which is Macy's, instead of the plate sponsored. Last year, we had a record-breaking year where we did 825 trees. And this year, we're being much more aggressive with the goal, which is 1,750 trees. Nice goal. And we've also added a new component, which is that through the mapping work that Crystal and her team are doing, we're identifying low canopy neighborhoods. And folks in those neighborhoods are going to be able to do a priority registration where they get a chance to get the tree first. And that'll run for a couple weeks before we open up the general registration.
And then that will be based upon the 2020 BPC, so the information that we're getting back now.
Great.
How will we know?
I'm sorry.
How will we know? How will the people in those neighborhoods know?
So we've got a very ambitious campaign again. We're going to use Matrix networks, our networks, and Foundations networks. Where we mostly be a digital campaign where we can target those specific neighborhoods. We notify the CPACs and the community councils in those neighborhoods. This is available.
Yeah.
And generally, the last couple of years, I mean, it takes off like wildfire usually.
Yeah.
But part of the challenge has been the trees are gone before the low canopy neighborhoods get a shot.
Exactly.
So hopefully this will like that.
We've also tested our foresters. We have four foresters in one per district, north, south, east, and west, and those foresters are targeting those specific low canopy neighborhoods with their community contacts to spread the word as well.
And that is August. Did you say?
Yeah, it's actually late August for registration, the third week of August.
Okay, because I was thinking about community councils are typically on vacation in August. And they may miss that. Because I think meetings start again in September.
But we can look at notifying them ahead and saying it's going to be coming from the state. You know, keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Share.
Great.
And then, as you know, we had the Mary Spencer statue dedication. Vice President Thomas did a great job. Thanks for helping out. It's Kara. We also, if you haven't seen it, we sent it to you, put a video together that turned out really, really good. And I wanted to give props to Sarah Moskovitz and DeAndre Davis from our team, who spent almost a year cataloging and documenting the whole project. If you didn't see it, it was just very, very well done. As was mentioned earlier, Tom did his comments. It's happening July 23rd. I know Tom is very excited. We're expecting a big crowd. It should be a lot of fun. Looks like it could be warm, but it'll be a lot of fun nonetheless. And then finally, as we mentioned, July is Parks and Recreation Month. And as I mentioned, we challenged our patrons and our staff to share their Parks and Recreation stories with us. And we've gotten a great response to that. So I just wanted to share one of those with Mary's got a picture she's going to. My park story happened just last week. After a wonderful day at Snail Park, we got home to find that my 6-year-old son left his baseball glove, his most prized possession by far, somewhere in the park. He was absolutely devastated. I sent a quick message to Cincinnati Parks asking if there was a lost and found anywhere. And before I knew it, they had all their staff at the park looking for his glove. It was quickly found and safely returned to a very, very grateful boy. The amazing response I got to a simple inquiry and the willingness of the whole team to go above and beyond in such a generous way was such a gift to my son and to me. The parks are beautiful, and we've always loved our time at them. But to me, the people and their generosity and pride in what they do perfectly capture what the Cincinnati Parks experience and Cincinnati experience in general. So,
Awesome. Very good.
Thanks.
Thanks, Artie.
Yeah,
we've got a lot of
great.
wonderful stories like that that have been shared that we're sharing. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to commend you on that effort. I read those stories. They are terrific. Each one that I've read is so heartwarming. So good job.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and we do different things. You don't know what the response has been. This one we certainly look forward to.
That's great.
Thank you.
We're at that stage where we open up to commissioner comments or inputs.
Now, I could, lobbies, do we want to say what you want?
So Commissioner Castellini and I speak very frequently on, and I know it's something that's important to all of you, is that the Cincinnati Parks now utilizes the services of county as the federal lobbyist for the state. the federal lobbyist for the city at large. And there has been an advancement in the acquisition of the Army Corps dollars that have yet to be appropriated. The city did submit 2 major projects to Senator Brown's office, both of which were accepted by Senator Brown. That was the Western Hills Viaduct as well as the River's Edge. And now it continues to go through the process for budget approval. This was an attempt after many years of not being successful to obtain some of those dollars. And I'm hopeful that we know this is a top priority for the city. They have their lobbyist efforts focused on this. And so hopefully we'll have some good news shortly.
Great.
At least there was news.
Yes, that's good news. Anybody else? Commissioner North, any comments to add?
No, I don't think so. When the time's appropriate, I would like to ask a couple of questions.
That's appropriate.
Okay. We have CPD come, is it just quarterly then? It's not once a month. I just don't think in the 2 times that since I've been on the board that CPD has come that we've had much, if any, discussion about Smale Riverfront Park.
Yes, so the CPD does come quarterly. They were scheduled to come this quarter. However, Captain Swingley is on vacation. So he requested if he could report in August.
Okay. So Kara, I appreciate the information that you and Rocky sent over. Is there any update that's appropriate to provide to the park board regarding, maintaining or creating a more safe environment at Smale Riverfront Park?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to make a couple comments, and primarily the credit on our team goes to our Deputy Director, Jenny Mobley, who has not only formulated these direct relationships, but is actively engaged in those conversations and advocating for parks. So the conversation about safety at Smale Riverfront Park has been going on for quite a while. CPD has made generous efforts in other areas, but there were no resources that were associated for sustained efforts. That as a direct result of the incident that occurred at Smale Riverfront Park on the 4th of July, has shifted. The resources available have shifted. We are doing our part. Part of that is to finish the installation of the cameras where CPD will have direct access to those for the purposes of monitoring and or gathering information. A recent development that I am very pleased with is CPD has agreed that if we purchase cones, they will distribute them on Marion Way on Fridays, pick them up on Mondays. That's a significant, they were doing that at the height of COVID, but it has not been done since, and that will contribute a significant effort. And then the additional resources of CPD for additional patrols at that site. I think that our efforts at Smale Riverfront Park will require continued vigilance. And the only other comment I will offer is that the efforts of our team at CPD are not only focused on Smale Riverfront Park, but at addressing problematic areas throughout our system as well. Just attempting to continue to improve and enhance the safety of our parks, certainly an ongoing goal.
Here, I would just ask that, just as a matter of practice, that where you see opportunities for the park board to act on any changes to support crowd control, permitting events, that you bring those to our attention. I don't think that, I understand that the park staff doesn't act as security, clearly, but to the extent that we can do anything to promote safety in the parks, we want that opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay,
The only comment I would like to make is I want to commend the staff for all the good work they did on the budget development. And then thank you, Molly, for visiting all of those dog park options and you know, getting us focused. That saved probably a lot of time. Thank you.
okay, any other? With that, then I'm going to move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22 parentheses G close parentheses to consider the employment, discipline, or compensation of a public employee. And with that motion, Mary, would you take a roll call, please?
Can I get a second on the motion?
Second.
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes.
Commissioner Linder,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. I will say to those participating, we are going into executive session. I do not anticipate any actions being taken by the board following that. So we will come out of executive session, and the anticipation is that we will move to adjourn and adjourn the meeting at that time. But we'll now go into executive session. Thanks for anybody that's watching.